The camera winked at me. Not the hallway dome the landlord bragged about in the lease packet, the one with the fake red LED that blinks whether it's plugged in or not. I mean, the little cream disc screwed into the corner of my bedroom ceiling where a smoke detector should be, winking once like a secret kept too long. I was folding towels, still warm from the dryer, steam making the window do that soft fog when it gave a tiny pulse, the kind that makes you wonder if you imagined it. I held my breath so the apartment could tell on itself. The refrigerator hummed, the upstairs neighbor paced 3 slow steps and stopped. And in the quiet between those sounds, I heard the faintest click, not a groan. Not the building settling, a click like a throat deciding to speak. I stepped onto a chair and put my ear to that innocent plastic circle. No beeping, no smoke detector chirp for a low battery, just the dusty smell all cheap ceiling share and a whisper of warm air that had no business leaking from a sealed thing. I felt it then, the hair at the nape feeling that something sees you and shouldn't. I climbed down careful, folded the last towel slow, and told my hands to let the rest of me decide what happened next. Not my mouth, not my fists, my hands. I stood at the window with the towel against my chest the way you hold news when you're not ready to put it down. Outside, the courtyard lamp made a little lake on cracked concrete. A moth battered itself against the bulb in a pattern only the moth understood. Somewhere, someone turned a key that didn't belong to my life. I switched off the bedroom light and stared at the cream disc until my eyes made stars around it. If it blinked again, I didn't see. Maybe it never had. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the whole world is one long maybe until you write it down. I put the towel in the closet, took out my notebook from the top shelf, and wrote the date. That's my first discipline when the air goes strange. Write. I wrote 9:14 p.m., possible blinking on ceiling device, faint click, odor of warm plastic. Then I drew a little square in the margin so I could check it later, not for satisfaction, but for record. Paper is the only thing I've ever known that doesn't lie to please you. Before all that, life in apartment 3D was small and warm and known. My name is Ava, 47 years old, divorce signed and filed 5 years ago. One grown daughter who calls twice a week just to hear me exhale. I work mornings at the clinic front desk and afternoons doing insurance codes, the kind of job where people don't really look at you until they need you. I like it that way. I like my routine. Coffee dark enough to write with, 2 slices of wheat toast, radio low so the news can't boss my mood. Plants on the sill, 3 pothos, 1 stubborn fiddle, leaf fig that flirts with death and then throws a new leaf just when I start rehearsing the eulogy. The building is a brick U with a courtyard in the middle that collects echoes and cigarette smoke. Children leave chalk prayers on the concrete, hearts, hopscotch, sometimes a crooked sun. My neighbor on the right is Miss Paula, retired school bus driver with a laugh that starts in her ankles. On the left is a grad student who runs at odd hours and keeps her joy in a blender. Smoothies at dawn, laughter at midnight. We're a family in the way buildings are. We borrow sugar, we sign for each other's packages, we know each other's footsteps better than each other's last names. The landlord, mister. Leary is not a slumlord. Don't make him a monster too early. He dresses like a weekend golfer even on Tuesday afternoons and calls everyone kiddo even when our hair tells the truth. He has that way of making maintenance look like a favor he's doing his own good heart. I keep these things ship-shape, but he told me the day I signed the lease, tapping a glossy page in the welcome packet. Security upgrades, 2 dome cameras in the hallway, key fobs for the main door, dummy cameras in the laundry room as deterrents only. He smiled when he said that last part like we were sharing a joke. Can't be too careful these days, he added. People act right when they think somebody's watching. The apartment is 1 bedroom and a mercy of light. The kitchen is old but honest. White cabinets that remember every hand that's ever closed them. Laminate counters pretending to be stone and not fooling anyone. I painted 1 wall the color of a pear shadow and bought a thrifted table with a wobble I fixed by folding a grocery store receipt until it understood its new job. On Fridays, I bake cornbread in a cast iron skillet and call my daughter Maya so she can listen to it keep sizzling even after it's out of the oven. That sound, she says every time, is the definition of home. The first month, Mr. Leary stopped by twice for routine checks. He'd text an hour before, cheerful as a weather app. Swinging by to look at the radiator, no need to be home if you're busy. I was home both times, apron on, flour in my fingernail beds, and he'd stand in the doorway, exaggerating the squeak of the knob. I like to keep eyes on things, he'd say, scanning the room in a way I couldn't name yet. Tenants never notice what a trained eye sees. He looked past me then, at the ceiling corners, at my bookshelf, at the mirror over the mantel that teaches you the truth of your own posture. Nothing bad happened. He didn't step too close. He didn't touch anything he couldn't reasonably call building. When he left, I would feel like I feel after a bus passes too close to the curb. Not hurt, not even splashed, just aware of the angle between safety and accident. If you had asked me then, I would have said I was safe. If you had asked me what I feared most, I would have said something small and practical. A leak I don't see in time. A job I love going budget cold. My daughter calling from a number I don't recognize. I would not have said, the ceiling looking back. You never say the right thing about a storm until it's in your yard. On the night of the wink, I did what the best parts of me always do. I didn't perform. I prepared. I stood on the chair again and took 2 pictures with my phone, one with the light on, another with it off, flash bouncing a sharp little halo around the cream disc. I didn't unscrew anything. I didn't poke. If something is wrong and someone else knows it is wrong, sometimes the first damage you do is to the evidence. I set the chair back, smoothed the towel stack like it could keep my mood from wrinkling, and called Miss Paula. You ever notice our smoke detector don't beep right? I asked. She laughed first, because that's her reflex, then heard my tone and sobered. What happened, baby? I told her as clearly as I could without using words like spy or pervert or words that make the room small and your breath short. Maybe it's nothing, I said. But if it's something, I want a witness. I'm putting on my robe, she said. Don't touch a thing. She came over with her flip-flops slapping the hallway and her hair in a scarf the color of marigolds. We did. Everything slow. She stood on the chair and sniffed like a woman who once identified a coolant leak by smell alone. That's warm, she said, frowning. Detectors don't get warm unless they're mad or lying. She climbed down and peered at my router on the bookshelf. You know how to see what's on your Wi-Fi? I nodded. Do not underestimate women who manage their own lives for a living. I opened the admin page and read the list of connected devices out loud, like trying to recognize names at a reunion. Phone, Ava, laptop, Ava, printer, smart TV, something at the bottom, cam_dome02. I felt my breakfast consider a second career. I took a screenshot, then another when the name changed to a string of numbers like a disguise put on in a hurry. Miss Paula put her hand on my back. Okay, she said softly, the way nurses say breathe when they put the needle in. Okay. I wrote the time next to the new screenshot and drew another square in the margin to check later. When my hands remembered they belonged to me, I texted Mr. Leary. Hi, it's Ava in 3D. The bedroom smoke detector is making a strange click. Please advise. I'll be home this evening if you need access. I hit send and felt like I'd set a trap, not to catch a person, but to catch a story pretending to be a coincidence. He replied, almost at once, Thanks, kiddo. Probably just low battery. I can swing by tomorrow morning with a ladder. No worries, no worries. I thanked him, then opened a new note and wrote a different sentence. If it is nothing, paper will still be paper. If it is something, paper will be a boat. Miss Paula squeezed my shoulder. You want me to sit with you a while? I'm all right, I said. It wasn't bravado. It was a plan forming teeth. I'm going to sleep with the bedroom door open and the living room lamp on, and I'm going to count clicks. She laughed then, the kind that pushes dark corners back. If you hear one too many, bang on the wall, I'll come bang back. We hugged in the doorway like women who know their lives depend on being correctly nosy. When she left, I made chamomile I didn't need and laid on the couch under the throw my daughter crocheted freshman year. I watched that cream disc until my eyelids were the only curtains in the room. I didn't see it blink again. I heard one click at 10:52 p.m. and wrote it down. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to silence so complete it felt staged. I wrote that down too. Morning would decide what kind of story I was in. Mr. Leary arrived at 9:06 a.m. with a stepladder and the breath of a man who likes peppermint for breakfast. He knocked the way landlords knock, already halfway in. I met him with coffee and a mug that said, "Do not disturb because I like jokes, only I can hear." "Morning, kiddo," he boomed, all sunshine and tool bag. "Detector chirping?" "Clicking," I said, neutral. "Bedroom." He set the ladder under the cream disc, glanced once around the room like a tourist, and wagged a finger at the ceiling. "These things, finicky, cheap plastic." He climbed 3 steps and pressed 2 fingers to the device like checking a pulse. "Huh?" he said. Not to me. I stood where I could see both his hands and his face in the mirror over the dresser. He twisted the outer ring, and I watched for the telltale of any honest smoke detector. A bayonet mount, a battery drawer, a UL mark stamped into the plastic. Instead, I saw 4 tiny screws seated too flush, and when he shifted his hand, a pinhole dead center like the period at the end of a sentence you're not allowed to read. "Can I get you anything?" I asked in the same tone I used to ask patients their date of birth. "Nah," he said. "Probably just needs a reset." He reached into his bag, came up with a small black remote, and without thinking, pointed it at the ceiling. The little disc gave the faintest click. He froze. I fixed my face at polite oatmeal. "What's that?" I asked, tilting my head like a sparrow. "This?" He recovered with a laugh too fast. "Universal resetter. Manufacturers are doing all kinds of fancy. Puts them back to factory." He dropped the remote into the bag like a magician palming a coin. He unscrewed the thing with a small driver, turned it just enough so his body blocked my view, then announced, "Looks good. I'll swap the battery anyway. Better safe." He held up a 9-volt from a blister pack as proof. While he pretended to change a battery, I glanced at my phone, the router admin page still open from last night. CamDome02 had reappeared on the list 6 minutes earlier when he arrived. The vendor field that I'd missed before now showed a name I didn't recognize, but Miss Paula's voice in my head said, "Write it down first, learn it later." I took another screenshot, time-stamped. Saved. He replaced the device with performative care, wiped a phantom smudge from the ceiling, and climbed down. "All set," he said, clapping dust from his hands that didn't have any. "Thank you," I said. "Hey, just curious, what brand are these detectors? My daughter likes to know what keeps me safe." I smiled like a woman making sentimental conversation. He blinked. "A wholesale. My supplier mixes stock, so no manual." I let the question hang like a polite coat. "I'll email you something," he said too quickly. "Any other issues?" "Water pressure? Heat? All good." I walked him to the door. He hesitated like a man remembering he left the stove on somewhere else. "You know," he added, "lots of buildings are adding little cameras. In unit, I mean, strictly smoke and carbon detection, but they connect to systems for maintenance. Cheaper for everybody. No privacy issues. It's the future." He said no privacy issues like a man who'd already argued with himself about it. The room took a breath. I opened the door wider. "I'm old-fashioned," I said. "I like detectors that just detect." He smiled the way men smile when they don't want to show their teeth. Sure. "Well, holler if it chirps." When he left, I stood very still, as if motion might smear fresh fingerprints off a moment. Then I picked up my phone and took pictures. The device from the floor, the ladder marks on the rug, the remote I hoped I had imagined. No photo of that, just the imprint of the lie it left in the air. I texted Miss Paula. He came, called it a reset, used a remote. Router shows CamDome02 online when he was here. I'm documenting. She replied with a string of exclamation points and then, "You need a second set of eyes with a different last name? You want my nephew to look? He does IT for the school district. Quiet, respectful." Yes, I typed, "but I want to do something first. I changed the Wi-Fi password, not to win, to measure. The minute I hit save, the device list refreshed. Cam Dome 02 fell off the edge like a slip of paper in a breeze. I stared at the blank space it left and felt a complicated relief. The kind you feel when a test confirms what you feared and also gives you something you can hold in your hand. I wrote the time and drew another square. Then I set a timer for 1 hour to see if anything tried to reconnect. At lunch, I called my daughter. I didn't pour the whole storm into her ear. She lives 3 states over with exams, rent, a life I want her to own without my anxieties borrowing her couch. I said, "Baby, I'm fine. I'm just changing some passwords." She said, "Good. People are wild." And then we laughed because sometimes laughter is an agreement not to say the scariest version of things. At 1:08 p.m., my timer chimed. The device list stayed clean. My heart did not. I Googled the vendor name from the screenshot. The results read like a whisper. A white labeled IP camera company, tiny modules that can be tucked into detector shells for aesthetics. A PDF with a default admin login and a mobile viewing app marketed to landlords with words like ease and oversight. I printed the page and put it under last night's notes. The stack made a little weight on the table the wind could emboss. Miss Paula's nephew Jamal came at 4, carrying a laptop like a promise and moving like a man who has learned to enter women's apartments with exaggerated respect. He stood in the doorway until I said, "Please." He looked at the device with a craftsman's quiet. "May I?" he asked, and I nodded. He never touched it without narrating. "I'm going to look for a manufacturer stamp, but there isn't one." "That's interesting." He pointed with the pen instead of a finger. "See that pinhole? Smoke detectors don't need that. CO detectors sometimes have vents, but the placement..." He turned, eyes asking permission to check the router. I showed him the screenshots. He smiled. "You did my job for me." He ran a network scan and found a second ghost, a device that had connected earlier in the week for 6 minutes at 6 a.m. when I sometimes shower, listed as HVAC_monitor with the same vendor prefix. He underlined the MAC address and slid the paper back to me like a teacher returning an A+. "Look," he said gently. "I'm not the police. I'm not a lawyer, but this is not standard. And doing this without consent in your bedroom?" He didn't finish the sentence. Men who know dignity leave some words unsaid. "What do I do?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. It had other work to do. "You collect," he said. "You don't climb the ladder. You don't cut wires. You don't tip him off beyond what he already knows. You change your Wi-Fi password weekly and write down what drops. You point your own camera at the ceiling and let it watch that thing blink. And you talk to somebody who knows the law." He handed me a little plug-in outlet timer with a digital face. "Put this on your router overnight sometimes. Randomize when it powers down. If he's watching, he'll feel the hiccup. If he messages you about internet issues, you'll have your tell." I looked at him. "You've seen this before?" He took a breath, then nodded. "I've seen men hide a lot of sins under the word maintenance." We drank water at the table, each of us polite with the other's rage. He wrote his name and number, and beneath it his mother's, in case you ever need an older woman voice to answer a door. Miss Paula called to make sure he had eaten. "Certainty," he grinned. "I'm fine, Ma." And we all laughed because we needed to believe we were a family capable of stopping harm by being in the same room. After he left, I sat with the house until it told me what to do next. I gathered my notes, the screenshots, the vendor printouts, and the copy of my lease. I read the right of entry section twice. 24 hours notice except in emergency. I circled emergency like it owed me a receipt. I flipped to the security section. The packet bragged about hallway cameras and laundry room, dummy cameras, but said nothing about devices inside units. I wrote, "Silence is information" in the margin. Then I opened my laptop and searched for a tenant lawyer with reviews that use words like listened and documented instead of shark. I found one 3 blocks away. Baker and Ash, small office above a nail salon. Their website plain as a good shirt. I sent an inquiry message before I could talk myself into being reasonable. I attached 3 screenshots in the PDF vendor page and typed, "I am concerned about undisclosed surveillance devices in my rental unit. I have not altered or removed anything. I have documented network connections and observed behavior. Please advise next steps." They wrote back in 12 minutes. "Can you come at 10 a.m. tomorrow? Bring your lease and any notes. Do not engage further with the landlord until we talk." I closed the laptop and went to the bedroom. The cream disc sat in its corner like a polite guest who never leaves. I took my little plant mister and sprayed the pothos until each leaf beaded and shone. Water tapping soil sounds like rain when you want it to. At 9:30, the router timer clicked off. The apartment exhaled. The tiny silence when Wi-Fi dies is a real thing if you live alone. I watched the ceiling. 1 minute. 2. At 9:33, my phone buzzed. "Everything okay with your internet, kiddo?" From a number labeled Leary. I took a screenshot before I let my thumbs near an answer. Then I put the phone face down and wrote the time in the notebook, drawing the neatest square of the night. Tomorrow, I would go from maybe to "Sir, we need to discuss the law." Baker and Ash sat over a nail salon that smelled like acetone and laughter. The stairwell was narrow and honest. The banister was polished by other people's problems. I arrived 10 minutes early with my blue folder and the notebook that had started to feel like a spine. The receptionist wore silver hoops and a sweater the color of wet slate. "Ava," she asked softly, "you're with Ash." She said the name like a confidence. Ash was a woman in her 50s with short hair and eyes that knew the price of talking too soon. She didn't shake my hand right away. She looked at my folder. "Let's give your paper a seat," she said, clearing a spot on the conference table. When we sat, she put a legal pad between us like a bridge. "Tell me what happened. Start with your body, what you saw, heard, smelled. We'll add law after." So I did. The click, the warm plastic, the vendor name, the landlord with a remote, the text when the router timer hiccuped, Jamal's scan. I slid screenshots across like cards at a careful game. Ash didn't interrupt, even to praise me for documenting. She let me empty the drawer. When I finished, she nodded once. "Ah, 3 lanes," she said, drawing 3 neat columns. 1. Preservation. Make sure nothing disappears. 2. Cease. Stop the surveillance without tipping into destruction of evidence. 3. Remedies. Your rights, both civil and criminal, and how we protect you from retaliation. She wrote as she spoke, her pen making a sound like rain heard from a porch. "First," she said, "we send a litigation hold to Mr. Leary and the building's management entity. Plain English. Do not destroy or alter any devices, recordings, logs, or access records. We'll also demand access for an inspection by a certified third-party tech, someone we choose, not his cousin with a toolbox." "And police?" I asked. Saying the word in that small room made me aware of my heartbeat. It sounded like a tap dripping in a far sink. "We'll do a non-emergency consult," she said. "Bedroom is a high privacy area. Consent matters. But I want to get your civil protection in place first. You're in the unit, and we need to keep you safe there and keep him from stepping on your neck with a panic inspection or a trumped-up eviction." She met my eyes. "Retaliation is illegal, but it's also a habit. We'll put that into writing." The door knocked, and an assistant slid in a printed copy of my lease I'd emailed. Tabs already sprouting like yellow petals. Ash flipped to right of entry and tapped the paragraph I'd circled last night. "Good," she murmured. "No consent for in-unit monitoring. Nothing about smart detectors. Their packet bragged about dummies in common areas. Silence in a bedroom cuts against him. What do you need from me?" I asked. "Stay steady," she said. "Do not climb a ladder. Do not unplug. Do not confront. You're doing the hardest part already, choosing paper over performance. Keep logging." If you can, set up your own camera pointed at the device. Timestamp visible, your phone or a wall clock in frame. If there's blinking, we want it on video. If there's silence, we want that too. I laughed, short. Evidence of silence. It proves you didn't imagine a storm, she said. Sometimes quiet is a fact. She drafted while I breathed. The letter was 6 paragraphs of simple verbs dressed for court: preserve, cease, allow, acknowledge. It named the device's location: bedroom, ceiling, corner, above dresser, without embellishment. It listed MAC addresses and the times they had joined my network. It demanded the make and model, installation date, person who installed, and the purpose claimed. It requested building camera hallway footage showing his entry with the remote. It warned that any entry to my unit must be scheduled through council with 24 hours notice except for an actual emergency verified by a third party. It said retaliation prohibited under the lease and law, then cited a statute number like a street address. It copied the property manager, the owner LLC, and a generic compliance email listed on a city housing site. She slid the draft toward me. Anything here that doesn't sound like your truth? No, I said. It sounds clean. Good, she said. She signed and scanned. We'll send this certified and by email. You do not reply to him if he text barks. Send to me. We decide when and how to answer. We called the non-emergency police line from her office. She introduced herself, identified me, and said the careful phrase, possible unlawful surveillance device in the tenant's bedroom. The officer on the other end sounded like a man who wished every call came with a lawyer. He took my name and address, gave a report number, and said a patrol would document later today. Ash thanked him and hung up. The report matters even if nothing else does for a while, she said. Paper makes cowards tired. I left with a manila envelope and the peculiar calm that comes when somebody older than your fear says, "We have a plan." The nail salon below had a whirl of dryers and chatter. A woman looked up from her pedicure and smiled. I smiled back at our separate salvations. Back home, I positioned my old phone on a shelf to stare at the corner like a faithful dog. I turned on the timestamp overlay and whispered to an empty room, "Watch for me." Miss Paula knocked once and let herself in. "I made you muffins," she said, setting down a plastic container and a bigger thing, her presence. At 2:41 p.m., the first email landed from Leary's address, not his bare thumbs. "Dear tenant," it began, "because cowardice loves formality. The device in question is part of a smart safety pilot intended to improve smoke detection. No audio or video capability is present. Any network appearance is maintenance only. No privacy violation exists. Please refrain from making baseless accusations." He CC'd the property manager and ended with a line about loving our tenant family. Ash replied from her chair in the world with a paragraph that fit on a single screen. "Thank you for your prompt response. Please provide the manufacturer, model number, installation date, vendor name, and written consent documentation signed by the tenant. We note your device appears on the tenant's local network as a camera. Kindly explain the vendor OUI, the default admin interface, and the observed connectivity coinciding with your presence. Our client will not refrain from documenting her home. We expect your confirmation by 5 p.m. regarding an inspection by our retained technician tomorrow." She attached the police report number at the bottom like a paperweight. 5 minutes later, a text from Leary pinged my phone anyway, skipping past the adults. "Kiddo, this is getting out of hand. I take care of my buildings. You're scaring other tenants with your paranoia. Let me pop in and swap the unit. 5 minutes. No big deal." I screenshotted and forwarded to Ash. She replied, "Do not answer. He does not enter." At 4:03 p.m., the property manager emailed, suddenly fluent in caution. "We acknowledge receipt. We will preserve all devices and logs. We agree to an inspection at 10 a.m. tomorrow with your technician. We will not enter without counsel present." The words "will not enter" felt like stepping onto a solid stair. At 5:17 p.m., a patrol officer knocked. He was young and careful and kept his hands visible the whole time. I showed him the sealing device and my notes. He looked at the pinhole and said what honest men say when they're not sure what they're allowed to say. That's not great. He took the report number and promised to add observed unusual device in bedroom, suspicious. He gave me a card. If anyone tries to enter without notice, a call, he said, even if they have keys. After he left, I stood in the doorway and let the day sit in my throat. Betrayal is not always a lover in your bed. Sometimes it's said as the person with the keys telling himself a story about safety that doesn't include your dignity. At 9 p.m., I turned the router timer on again. At 9:03, no text came. At 9:05, my old phone caught a blink, one soft pulse like a heartbeat, the timestamp glowing in the corner. I didn't gasp. I checked the battery, checked the angle, checked my own bias, then I hit save and slid the clip into the blue folder under Ash's letter. I went to bed with the bedroom door open and my hand on my notebook like prayer beads. Tomorrow the technician would come. Tomorrow the cream disc would meet its name. The technician arrived 10 minutes early, which is a kindness you can measure. Her name was Raina, black work pants, hair braided close, a pelican blue tool case that clicked like a metronome when she set it on my table. She shook my hand with the firm, not trying to prove anything grip of a woman who has been led into a lot of rooms after something invisible went wrong. I'm here for one thing, she said, voice low and even. Truth. I don't pull, cut, or alter until we've documented every step. You keep your phone out. You film me filming. Chain of custody is a choir. More voices, cleaner harmony. I liked her already. Ash arrived 3 minutes later with her legal pad and a small square body camera she clipped to her lapel. Standard, she said, protects everyone. The property manager came with a custodian named Jorge. No Leary. That absence felt like a kind of confession. We stood under the bedroom corner, the way people stand for prayer, heads tipped up, mouths set. Raina put on nitrile gloves, snapped them once like punctuation, and held up a white board with today's date, my address, and the words suspected concealed device. She had me call the time aloud as she recorded a slow, loving pan of the ceiling, the walls, the positions of the furniture, even the dust patterns. Dust tells stories, she murmured. If something was moved, dust complains. She extended a telescoping inspection mirror on a wand and angled it gently toward the cream disc. Camouflage detector shell, she said, clinical as a radiologist. Non-UL plastic. 4 microfasteners. Center aperture. She leaned closer. That's a pinhole lens cap. Likely 2.8 millimeters fixed. If audio's present, mic will be behind a perforation or edge seam. She glanced at my router. Let's talk before we touch. We moved to the table. Raina opened her case and brought out a handheld spectrum analyzer and a little black box that looked like a polite book. RF sweep first, she said. If it's transmitting, we'll see noise where there shouldn't be. If it's recording locally, we'll look for storage. She powered the analyzer. The screen lit with hills and valleys of invisible weather. She swept the wand in a lazy figure 8 under the disc. Noise rose, a small, insistent mountain at 2.4 gigahertz, and settled when she pulled away. She tested the hallway, the kitchen, the bathroom, flat. Back under the disc, the mountain again. Active 2.4, she said, calm. Could be Wi-Fi camera, could be BLE beacon. We'll confirm she set a portable access point to isolate the band, then asked me to unplug my router entirely. When the apartment's internet died, the analyzer's mountain didn't. Raina made a pleased sound. That's infrastructure independent, she said. Either a built-in AP or a peer-to-peer broadcast. It wants to talk to a phone nearby or a hub that stays available. Ash wrote that down word for word. The property manager shifted and swallowed like his tie had opinions. Next, Raina said, we look without taking. I'm going to loosen the faceplate 2 turns. We'll photograph before we move anything further. Everyone ready? I nodded. My hands held the edges of the table like railings. She climbed the stepladder, leaned close, and turned each tiny screw by a quarter until the faceplate released with the soft sigh. Photo, she said, and I moved to get her shoulder view as she lifted the plate 1 inch. Inside was a circle the size of a teacup saucer, a blackboard, a neat little lens dead center, and my breath changed, 2 thin wires leading to the wall instead of a battery cradle. Hardwired low voltage, she narrated, not a smoke detector. Potted mic. She pointed with the end of her pen to a pinprick grill near the lens. Manufacturer marking. She fished a small flashlight from her pocket and illuminated a stamp so faint you had to want to read it. She spoke the model number slowly. I wrote it in the margin like a prayer. Photo, 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 she said, smiling at the rhythm of it. MAC address label here. Matches 10 in screenshots. She turned her head toward my old phone, still pointing from the bookshelf. Camera clear, timestamp clear, good. She looked down at me. You're going to be okay, she said, not like a promise, but like a measurement. Can you see storage? Ash asked. Raina tilted the flashlight. Micro SD slot present occupied. She did not remove the card. We do not extract without consent from counsel and a witness catalog. For now, we confirm. We document. We preserve. She asked me to power my router again, then stood on the ladder watching the analyzer. Strong handshake, she said, eyes on the screen. Device just tried to reconnect to a known SSID, failed, then brought up its own AP name. She read a string identical to the one in my screenshots. Broadcasting, it's calling out to whoever used to listen. The manager cleared his throat. We purchased security packages. I'm not aware of every... Ash raised one palm without looking at him. We'll get to you. Raina replaced the faceplate with reverence, tightened 2 screws until snug, left 2 slightly shy. That's my tell if anyone tampers before we come back, she said. I'll log the position. She placed a tiny paper evidence seal across 1 screw head and signed it with a Sharpie. If broken, we'll photograph. Next, she said, the so-called HVAC monitor. She followed Jamal's notes to the living room vent. Different shell, she said. Similar mischief. The RF sweep sang the same song, another pinhole, another MAC label, another micro SD slot occupied, another paper seal signed. How many more? I whispered. 2, she said, scanning. Laundry room dummy? Real enough to blink but not record. Hallway domes? Those are standard. She glanced at the manager. Your vendor invoices will tell us what you bought. Your emails will tell us what you asked them to do. He tugged his cuffs like they were too honest. Ash asked for a moment alone with him in the hallway. Their voices were low and careful. She returned with a copy tone. They're forwarding invoices and service tickets, she said. They say pilot program 3 different ways. No consent, no notice. Maintenance only is not a magic spell. She looked at me. You're not crazy. You're correct? The technician finished by taping a printed sign inside my entry closet where only I would see it. Do not remove, power down, or alter any device pending inspection. Preservation in place. ARPA valid CTI. She handed me a small motion-activated chime. Put this on your bedroom doorknob when you're out, she said. If someone opens the door, you'll hear it as soon as you come home. It won't stop harm. It will tell on it. When they all left, the apartment felt like a church after a service. Air is still cut into squares by something bigger than opinion. I sat at the table and put my hands flat to steady the tremor in my fingers. You think you'll scream when you see a camera where you undress. I didn't. I felt something heavier, the weight of being right about a thing you begged yourself to be wrong about. Ash called an hour later. We've sent a notice of breach, she said. We're tendering a demand to remove all devices under our supervision and to preserve all recordings. We've asked for a third-party escrow of any storage and for the vendor to mirror their servers. We've copied the city housing office and politely the DA's intake email. Now we wait for them to do what people do under a light. Deny, deflect, or deal. What do? I asked again, because that's the most honest question any of us have. Eat, she said. Hydrate. Sleep in the room that makes your ribcage quiet. If you want, stay at a friend's tonight. It's your call. If you stay, door open, lamp on, keep your notebook. If he contacts you directly, forward, respond to nothing. Miss Paula came with soup that tasted like a noon sun. We sat on the couch, my old phone still pointed at the corner like a loyal dog. Baby, she said, patting my knee, if it wasn't your story, I wouldn't believe it. And I know that's half the battle. Getting folks to believe the thing you wish wasn't true. I'm not even angry, I said, surprised at my mouth. I'm insulted. Like he put his hand in the pocket of my life without asking. That's a precise anger, she said. It knows where to sit. That night, I set the chime on the bedroom knob and the timer on the router and slept on the couch because the living room had nothing left to hide. At 9:12, the timer hiccuped the Wi-Fi. No text came. At 11:47, the chime stayed mute and the camera on my shelf recorded a room doing what rooms do best when you tell the truth on them. Rest. Morning would bring in voices and the first version of Mr. Leary's story. Stories like his always come in drafts. Mine already had paper. By 10 the next morning, the email parade started. Subject lines like people pretending to be furniture. Device inventory. Pilot rollout. Safety compliance. Ash forwarded each to me with little yellow notes that said, read, breathe, eat something while you read. The invoices came first, a PDF stack from a vendor with a cheerful name that should have belonged to a bakery. Line items in clean fonts, detector shell camera, bedroom, unit specific, vent monitor, living area, unit specific, mobile access license, property admin +1. Beside each, shiny words like installation, testing, training. The dates were last month. The text signature on the work order was a name I didn't know. Under notes, owner requested discreet placement, emphasized aesthetics. My stomach made a sound the kettle recognized. Ash called. See the license count? She asked. Admin +1, your landlord and someone else. We'll pry that name loose. Her voice had the patience of a mechanic who won't guess until the hood is open. An hour later, the vendor sent their first version of a conscience. We provide safety solutions to multifamily properties. Our detector shells are designed for smoke awareness only. Ash wrote back with the model numbers Raina had read, the MAC addresses Jamal had logged, the micro SD slots Raina had blessed by leaving alone. Your brochure promises remote live verification and event review for maintenance. Please confirm whether smoke awareness requires a pinhole lens and local storage. She CC'd the city's housing email again like a gentle drumbeat. I had never seen the law work up close. Movies make it sound like doors slam and people confess. In real life, it's the sound of heels in a hallway, printers, breathing. It's a steady refusal to accept the first draft of a lie. Raina returned after lunch with a small Pelican case labeled like a museum loan. We'll image the storage, she said. Read-only copy. Original back where we found it. We don't watch content here. We log presence. The what can come later with an order. She set up a little tripod under the bedroom corner and filmed her own hands like they were the story. Ash filmed her filming. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not out of anger, but to keep from clapping. They lowered the faceplate. Raina slid the MSD card out with a tool that looked like it belonged to a watchmaker. She slipped it into a right blocker, attached a cable, and read the card's AD into the camera like calling a name at roll. File system present, she said. Directory structure. Yup, timestamps. She didn't say video. She didn't have to. Evidence is a grammar your bones learn before your mouth. In the living room, the vent shell gave up its twin card like a coin ode. Both went back in after they were mirrored. Both seals were signed again. The screws rested 2 hairs shy of tightness. The technician's little tell. Anyone touches that, she said. The thread pattern, tattles. Ash printed the litigation hold on cream paper and had me initial the bottom corner like a family Bible. This goes to the super's office door, inside your door, and to the manager, she said. Not to scare. To remind. Everyone behaves better when paper is in the room mid-afternoon, City Housing wrote. We've opened a file. Inspector assigned. We request access to the unit and the devices under your council supervision tomorrow between 1 and 3 p.m. They copied the property, manager, and a name from the DA's office I'd only ever heard on the radio. The line between my little life and the big one blurred, then sharpened again. Leary broke his silence at 4:22 p.m., finally choosing a keyboard over his thumbs. To whom it may concern, he began, like the letter was lost and would belong to whoever found it. We implemented a safety pilot using smart detectors after a near miss last winter in another property. No intent to invade privacy exists. The cameras referenced here are not operational for video capture. He put quotes around cameras like he was pinching the word with 2 fingers. Ash's reply was shorter than his posture. Intent is not an element. Function is. Remove operational devices now under our supervision, preserve all data, and confirm all access logs, user credentials, and license holders by 6 p.m. Your entry to tenant units is prohibited outside scheduled inspection with council present. Retaliation, including rent increases, non-renewal threats, or safety checks, will be met with injunctive relief and complaint. She added a polite sentence about my quiet enjoyment, a phrase so beautiful I wanted to embroider it on a pillow. I did my part, the small domestic soldiering that keeps the heart busy while paper fights. I put the motion chime on my bedroom doorknob. I moved the mirror so it no longer saw the ceiling. I made spaghetti because stringing something together felt like a spell. Miss Paula came over in her house shoes, sniffed the sauce, and said, "You could sue for scent trespass for what they put you through," which made us both laugh hard enough to cry a little. At dusk, I took my notebook to the courtyard. The chalk hearts were more smudged than shape after last night's dew, but some kid had drawn a little square with waves inside it and written Wi-Fi above it like a prayer to a modern god. I sat on the bench that can see everyone's windows and wrote, "Today we took names away from maybe." The word looked sturdy on the page. 2 tenants I'd only waved at before crossed the courtyard like they had rehearsed it in the mirror. The first introduced herself as Danny from 1B, shoulders tight as a bowstring. "He came into my place last week to check the sink," she said, air quotes violent. Something felt off. I thought I was being dramatic. Aka, the second, a man in 4C who repaired bicycles in the evenings, nodded. "I'm not dramatic," he said. "I'm angry. They put a thing over my baby's crib. His jaw climbed 3 rungs and stuck there. You started this." "I started writing," I said. The rest followed. We didn't plan a meeting. It became one anyway. Word went up the stairwell like steam. Jamal from down the hall joined, hands in his pockets, eyes on the building, listening to it like a mechanic listens to an engine he can't touch yet. Miss Paula brought folding chairs like she'd expected this all along. Nobody shouted. We said what rooms we found shells in. We wrote unit numbers. We practiced what Ash had told me. No ladder, no cutting, no confrontation. Paper first, paper second, paper every time. By 9, the property manager emailed a building-wide notice with a subject line that pretended nothing big was happening. Smart detector update. The body tried to sound like a weather report. We are evaluating a new safety system. Some units have installed detectors that may appear different than traditional devices. We are working with council to ensure compliance. Please do not tamper with any equipment. The last line was a little italic threat. I could feel Ash drafting the reply without lifting her pen. I slept on the couch again, the lamplight warm as bread. At 2:06 a.m., the motion chime in my bedroom sang a single polite tone that didn't belong to any dream I recognized. I sat up so fast my breath got left behind. The living room camera saw nothing move but me. I took the chime off the knob in the morning and found a smudge on the brass where a hand not mine had tested it. I wrote the time, took a photo of a smudge that would mean nothing to a stranger, and forwarded both to Ash with the subject, "Someone is restless." At 10, our clinic manager pulled me into her office and closed the door the way friends do when they learned your storm's name. "Do you need time?" she asked. The question was a pillow at the right height. I took the afternoon off without apologizing. When I left, she squeezed my hand. "You're doing the quiet kind of brave," she said. "It always looks smaller than it is." By noon, Ash had filed for a protective order in language that didn't need italics to be loud. City Housing confirmed the inspection window. The vendor wrote again with a different tone, their legal tone. "We are cooperating. Our understanding was that devices were installed in common areas. We will suspend all remote access for this property pending review." Remote access suspended felt like the moment a smoke alarm quits lying and you can hear your own stove again. At 1:30, the inspector arrived, a woman in a city jacket who introduced herself simply as Hernandez. No first name, as if she were an office and a person both. She took notes on carbon paper that made copies in triplicate, each sheet a promise that record multiplies. "We will look at it all," she said, eyes kind but not soft. "Bedrooms are not pilot programs. Bedrooms are bedrooms." We stood under the corner again. Reina's camera watched her. My little camera watched them both. Hernandez watched all three and then set her pen down. "Here's what will happen," she said, counting on her fingers. 1. The devices remain under seal until we have them mirrored and cataloged. 2. The owner provides all invoices and consent forms, which we already know he does not have. 3. Any device in any dwelling unit will be removed by a licensed electrician under city witness. 4. No entry without notice. 5. Any retaliation will be my favorite thing to handle. Miss Paula, in the doorway, let out a low, satisfied hum. It sounded like rain finally choosing a gutter. That night, I put the blue folder on the shelf and stood for a long time in the doorway of my bedroom. The cream disc was still there because that was the deal, for now, but names had been taken, paper had been spoken, the room had been believed. I set my notebook on the nightstand and smoothed the cover like a living thing. I didn't sleep in there yet, but I stood where a woman sleeps and felt the floor learn her weight again. By morning, the building wore paper like winter coats. City Housing posted a yellow notice of investigation on the lobby glass, taped at 4 corners so the truth couldn't curl. A second sheet sat beside the mailboxes with language even a sleepy tenant could understand. No one may enter your home without 24 hours written notice, except for a real emergency. If you see an unfamiliar device, do not remove it. Call this number. A tiny tear in the corner told me somebody had already tried to pocket the phone number like a talisman. At 10, the electricians came, 2 women with tool belts and a patience that looked like strength stretched thin. Hernandez from the city returned with a clipboard and a small metal tag set, the kind they use to number parking meters and evidence. She handed me one like a souvenir. "You're Unit 3D, she said. "This one's for your device." Paper's good, but metal remembers too. Reina was back to witness removal. "We'll log every wire," she said, "cap every low voltage run, and leave any hole covered with a temporary blank until a licensed installer patches properly." She spoke contractor-like poetry. Ash arrived with a rolling case and a face that had slept in the same sentence all night. The property manager hovered in the doorway like he'd lost the script. Leary, of course, didn't show. His absence marched around the apartment louder than boots. We started in my bedroom. Reina filmed. Hernandez read the date and time into the room. The electrician loosened the plate with a gloved hand. "Device 3D-1, Reina said, tag hanging from the ladder. "Ceiling corner, northeast." The plate came away and the little black eye came into view. I watched the lens without blinking, the way you look at someone you intend to outlast. The electrician disconnected the low voltage lines, capped them in orange, and held the severed device beside a printed label like a passport photo. Hernandez attached a tiny metal number to the wire stub with a zip tie. 3D-1, she said, clicking her pen. "Removed, witnessed, sealed." They lowered the Vient shell in the living room with the same careful choreography. "Device 3D-2, Reina said to the room and the camera and the future. When both were boxed in anti-static foam and initialed, my apartment exhaled a note I hadn't realized it was holding. Downstairs, it turned out, wasn't so simple. Danny from 1B opened her door with her jaw set like a hinge installed wrong. Above my bed, she said, no greeting, and one in the nursery. Her voice broke on that last word like a rope fraying. The electrician nodded and moved with gentleness a surgeon would envy. By noon, the hallway was a pilgrimage. Neighbors with arms crossed, babies on hips, questions in their throats. Hernandez stood at the center like a traffic officer directing stories. We'll get to everyone, she kept repeating. Paper first, then removal. If you have a schedule, we'll honor it. If you need to leave, we'll document in your absence I loved her then for treating urgency like a line that could be respected instead of a riot that had to be outshouted. At 1, the inevitable happened. Leary arrived. He wore golfer khakis and a grin that had learned nothing. He breezed past the lobby notice with a glance, then stopped short when he saw Hernandez's jacket and Ash's body camera blinking its little honest blink. Afternoon, he said too loudly. I see we've got a circus. He looked around like he was picking the friendliest face. He chose mine because men like him always choose the woman who looks most like she'll still make coffee for other people in her own kitchen. Kiddo, he said, like the last week had been a small weather event. We could have handled this between us. Ash stepped forward before I could lift my chin. Mr. Leary, you are currently handling this between us, which includes my client, the city, and... She tipped her head toward Rena and the electricians. Professionals. He spread his hands. Safety pilot. Smart detectors. The vendor sold me. Hernandez held up a page the color of municipal resolve. Sir, step over here. We are going to read this together. She used a teacher voice that made him remember a desk he'd once carved his name into. She read each line of the code section like scripture. Installation, consent, private areas, recording capability. Do you see the word pilot here? She asked when she finished. That vendor said, he started. The vendor doesn't write city code, she said mildly. We do. He tried a new angle. Nothing was live. Maintenance only. Raina clicked the Pelican latch and lifted one device just enough to show the MSD RO slot and the tiny lens. She did not smirk. Live or not, recorded or not in a bedroom, she said, as if naming a constellation in a night sky you couldn't argue with. Neighbors had collected in a semicircle by then, the way people do when the world finally admits it did what you thought it did. Miss Paula stood at the front, arms folded, scarf tied like a crown. You put a thing over in my tub, Ronald, she said softly, using the name he hated, the one his mother probably used when the truth arrived before his excuses did. And I'm not your kiddo. For a flicker, I saw something plain in his face. A man who had convinced himself that invasions were guardianship and that compliance was affection. Then his mouth set. You people have no idea how much liability I carry, he said. If there's a fire, everybody sues. These systems are not the systems you put in, Ash said. You installed cameras that look like detectors. You did not obtain consent. You did not disclose. And you licensed remote access for admin +1. Who was the +1? Leary blinked. My maintenance supervisor. He said the last word too fast, as if he had just promoted someone in his head to make the sentence true. Name? Ash asked, pen already poised. He hesitated just long enough to confess. Heaven, my son. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was math, of course. Your son, not a vendor, not a bonded employee of the city. He a young man with a password and a free afternoon. Hernandez wrote the name down like a charge and then said very kindly, You need to go to your office now. You will send the full list of access credentials. You will not enter any unit today. You will not speak to tenants about this matter without counsel present. This isn't a conversation anymore. It's compliance. Something in her tone reached the little boy who used to get caught putting frogs in mailboxes. He lowered his eyes, nodded once, and left without trying to smile. The door closed behind him with the soft sigh of a building releasing a mistake. By evening, every in-unit device in our wing was tagged, mirrored, boxed, and logged. Hernandez taped a final sheet by the mailboxes. If you believe you were recorded, you may contact the DA's office at this number. If you feel unsafe, call 911. The sentence sat there like a chair at a table you were finally invited to sit at. News travels on invisible wires we didn't string. The next day, a reporter called Ash. The day after, a small local piece ran. No names, just an ongoing investigation into undisclosed devices in private living spaces. The photo showed a blurred cream disc in a gloved hand and the word trust in the headline like a question. At the clinic, patients brought me stories with their insurance cards. That happened to my cousin. My old landlord used to enter, always with a reason that wasn't a reason. I didn't know what to call it. I kept my voice low and my eyes soft. Call it wrong, I said, and printed the city number for a woman who had never printed anything for herself. The building formed a tenant council without ever saying the phrase. Jamal designed a Google form for maintenance requests so we could track response times together. Danny volunteered to collect questions for the city in one document instead of 10. The man from 4C fixed 3 of our wobbly chairs while his baby slept in a carrier against his chest. Miss Paula made a sign-up sheet for door watchers when inspections happened. 2 sets of eyes on every key. On Friday, Ash called with her voice wrapped in results. Civilly, she said, "We're negotiating. They know they're exposed. We're asking for 3 things. 1, removal of all devices at their cost. 2, a rent credit for affected tenants and a fund to pay for therapy should anyone need it because invasion lives in the body. And 3, a consent policy drafted with our input, posted, signed by both parties, and audited annually." "And criminal?" I asked, steady. "The DA is reviewing," she said. State law is a patchwork. Recording without consent in a bedroom is often chargeable. Even if they plead out to something dull, the record will be a kind of truth that doesn't need your mouth to keep repeating it. I thanked her. When I hung up, I opened my notebook to the first page where I had written 9:14 p.m. Possible blinking. I checked the square with my favorite pen and let the sound of the ink finding paper be louder than the last click I had heard from my ceiling. That night, Maya came to stay. She brought a bag of groceries and a face that had learned new angles since I last held it in both hands. We cooked together, bumping hips, speaking in kitchen shorthand. When we sat at the wobble-fixed table, she reached across and took my fingers in hers. "I'm proud of you," she said. No reservations, no qualifiers. It landed in my chest like the first warm day in March. We slept with our doors open, hers in the bedroom, mine on the couch out of habit. In the morning, she stood in the doorway and looked up at the blank of ceiling where the cream disc had been. The electrician had left a round metal cover, clean and ugly. "You gonna patch it?" she asked. "I might leave it," I said. "A little scar tells a true story." We went to the courtyard where the chalk had become a mural. Names of units, doodles of ladders, a big rectangle labeled paper with little boxes inside. Some kid had drawn a tiny camera with an X through it and written privacies, please underneath in backwards letters. I laughed so sudden and bright that Miss Paula stuck her head out her door to see. These were the public consequences. Paper on glass, devices in boxes, a man learning the difference between building and boundary, and tenants learning the verb organize. They didn't make me whole because I hadn't broken, but they put the cut edges back where they belonged. That evening, the building felt normal in a way you can't buy. People were loud about small things again. The dryer, eating socks, the mail coming late. I stood at my window and watched a moth beat itself against the courtyard lamp. And for the first time since the first click, the light looked like light instead of a trap. The settlement terms arrived on a Tuesday, folded in the kind of heavy paper that makes secrets feel smaller. Ash came by in person with 2 copies and a pen that clicked like punctuation. We sat at my table while Miss Paula fussed with tea and lemon slices as if we were about to bless something holy. "Read it out loud," Ash said, because words behave better when they're not alone. So I did, 1 line at a time, the way you read a recipe you don't want to ruin. Removal and destruction, all in unit devices taken out under witness, mirrored for evidence, then handed to the city. No copies retained by the owner or the vendor without an order. Rent credits. 3 months credit for every affected tenant, plus a modest fund earmarked for counseling because invasion leaves fingerprints on your sleep. Consent policy posted in every lobby and emailed with each lease renewal. Plain language, no smart detector euphemisms, a signature line with boxes that can only be checked by the person who lives with the consequences. Access logs, turned over, usernames, password changes, a list of every time someone peeked at the building like it was a weather app. Non-retaliation, in writing with teeth. Training, the vendor would pay for it, the manager would take it, the owner would sit in the first row. At the bottom, a sentence that landed like a small unclenching. We acknowledge the harm caused by undisclosed monitoring in private spaces and commit to corrective measures. It wasn't an apology with tears. It was a mouth learning a new shape. I signed. Ash signed as witness. Miss Paula slipped the lemon seeds into a paper towel to dry. We'll plant them, she said, like everything in this building could be coaxed into growing. The next morning, I woke early, the way you do when your body still expects bad news. The ceiling was smooth and honest where the round cover had been replaced with fresh drywall. Raina had sent her favorite patcher, a woman named Alma, who worked with a hawk feather stroke and left the tiniest swirl of blade marks, art not scar. A little reminder, you earned, she'd said when I tried to tip her and she refused. I ran my palm over the spot. It felt like the first day after a scab. I made a list I'd been waiting to write. Home practices, not paranoia, habits. New router with a guest network. Passwords that looked like poems. Motion chime moved to the front door because sometimes the best alarm is your own attention. A small, tasteful decal by the peephole. Love, Knox. I taped my list inside the hall closet where only I would see it. It felt like fitting a lock to a story. In the courtyard, the chalk mural had gotten layers. The kid who drew the little camera had added a crown to it and crossed it out again. Beside it, someone had written paper wins with the P backwards. Danny from 1B came out with a stroller and the kind of tired that babies and court letters both make. Therapy Fund covers 6 sessions, she said, almost shy. I made an appointment. She looked at me like I'd given her permission I didn't own. Good, I said. Take all 6, take 12 if they'll let you Jamal set up a tenants page with links to forums that used to be buried. The bike repair dad ran a Saturday chair clinic in the courtyard and fixed what wobbled. The building started smelling like coffee again, not fear. Even the mailboxes seemed to rattle less. One afternoon, Hernandez knocked, no clipboard this time, just hands and that steady city jacket. Final walkthrough, she said. We toured the empty corners together. She paused in my bedroom doorway like you pause at a church aisle before you walk yourself back into your life. You sleeping in here again? She asked. Tonight, I said. The word felt like a soft shoe. At the clinic, my manager pinned the local article to the break room corkboard with a sticky note. Ask Ava if you need the city number. Patients told me about calm things. Blood pressure readings they could live with, a new soup recipe, a granddaughter's first steps. Trouble still came through the door, but not like a flood, more like weather we knew how to talk about. On a Thursday, the city held a community meeting in our basement. Folding chairs, coffee in cardboard boxes, a PowerPoint with fonts that tried to be friendly. The vendor sent a man with a tie too tight who said they were re-evaluating their offerings. Leary came, pale at the edges, and sat in the second row between the property manager and his son. When public comment opened, Miss Paula went first because God made lines to be respected and queens to be recognized. Bedrooms are not dashboards, she said into the mic, her voice as soft as the one she uses to ask if you've eaten. If you need to keep us safe, you ask. You write it down. You invite us into the decision because we live with it after you go home. She nodded, set the mic down like a baby, and returned to her seat to hand Danny a tissue she'd already warmed in her fist. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My name had already done its work in the minutes. But as people trickled out, Leary stopped by the snack table and stood there with a paper cup like a man practicing humility. He looked at me and then down again, and I watched his mouth almost shape an apology. He settled for a nod. I gave him back a smaller one, not forgiveness, acknowledgement that a person had seen the edge of a cliff. That night, Maya FaceTimed me from her apartment with a plant in her lap. "For the patch," she said, turning the camera so I could see a glossy little ficus. "Name her Consent," I laughed, "or she'll be high maintenance." "Good," Maya said. "Boundaries are." When she visited a week later, we repotted Consent together in the bedroom near the corner that once pretended to protect me while it watched. Soil under fingernails, lemon oil buffed into the dresser top, a clean pillowcase that smelled like the line between now and then. It climbed into bed with the lamp on and the door open the way you do the first night after a storm. Sometime past midnight, I woke to rain, real rain tapping the window. It sounded like a kind of permission. In the morning, I made pancakes because I like the sound a batter spoon makes against a bowl. I wrote a note to myself on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny door. Keep paper, keep peace. Keep the door for love, not excuses. When I left for work, I caught sight of the patch spot once more. It didn't look like a wound anymore. It looked like an intentional circle, a place you keep a story. I won't say I felt grateful for any of it. I don't owe my harm that kindness, but I do feel larger in my own life. The building breathes with me now. People make eye contact in the hall. Jamal nods like a mechanic whose engine finally stopped knocking. Danny's baby sleeps. Miss Paula hums as she waters her thyme. Raina's paper seals are gone, replaced by paint. Ash sends a last email. Case remains open. You remain covered, and I slide it into the blue folder that has gotten heavier and strangely easier to lift. When I finally fell asleep in my bedroom, the house didn't listen to me anymore. It kept me. That's all I ever asked it to do. 2 Saturdays later, the building smelled like paint and lemon. Alma the Patcher had left us with smooth circles and little recipes for drying time. We decided to turn repairs into a party. Jamal dragged the folding tables into the courtyard. Danny brought drop cloths and those chubby foam rollers that make even beginners brave. Miss Paula cut lemon slices for every water pitcher as if she were warding off a drought of good sense. I set the ficus Consent on the windowsill by the bedroom corner. Its new leaves were still soft enough to dent with a fingerprint. "You like this light?" I asked it. The leaf leaned toward me like a coin nuzzling a palm. I took that as yes. We made a list on a sheet of contractor paper taped to the brick. Today, touch-up paint in affected rooms. Next week, tenant consent policy posting, signatures, ongoing counseling fund info on fridge magnets, a small sentence we could put on a card and hand to each other without ceremony. If something feels wrong at home, it probably is. Call. We kept the city number at the bottom like a drumbeat. I rolled the first stripe of paint across the round cover in my bedroom, a soft eggshell bandage disappearing into the ceiling. Maya filmed 2 seconds on her phone and then put it away. "No need to curate," she said. "Just a mark so you remember the day your ceiling remembered you." While the coats dried, we gathered in the courtyard with muffins that should have been illegal and coffee that made me forgive the mail for being late. Hernandez came in plain clothes, her city jacket a memory. She stood near the chalk mural and listened more than she spoke, counting our stories with her eyes, I think, so the office upstairs would know these weren't bullet points. Raina dropped by with a tin of screws labeled "Not Yours" and a grin that said she'd finally slept. Even the property manager came with a painter's cap pulled low. He didn't try to lead. He held the ladder. Mid-afternoon, a letter slid under my door in an envelope with my name spelled correctly. Inside was a short apology in Leary's tight, teacher-pleasing hand. No excuses, no legal language, just 3 sentences and a signature, followed by a copy of a training certificate for residential privacy compliance. It didn't warm me. It didn't need to. Some words are for the record, not the heart. I filed it behind the settlement and closed the blue folder like a chapter. The DA's office sent an update the same day, a phrase that read like a sigh of bureaucracy: administrative fines assessed, criminal review ongoing. I thought about how some harm gets punished, how some gets priced, and how some you carry in your bones until it dissolves by living. I didn't want a headline. I wanted a night of sleep where the only thing that watched me was the moon, bored and beautiful. That night came, quiet as shoes left by the door. I showered with the bathroom vent humming like a friend instead of a throat. While I smoothed the sheet and lay on my back in my rebuilt room. Rain had washed the city, and the window glow had that clean sink shine. I looked at the patched circle and didn't see a wound. I saw a medallion. There is power in an honest scar. It says something happened, and I am the one who got to name it. Before sleep, I wrote a short list called house verbs on my nightstand pad. Knock, ask, inform, consent, record, paper, preserve, repair, rest. I underlined rest twice, not because I had forgotten how, but because I wanted to remember on purpose. In the morning, I met Maya for church in the courtyard. No preacher, no hymnals, just sunlight and the gentle service of neighbors doing ordinary things on the far side of a mess. The bike dad tuned a chain and hummed off key. Danny bounced her baby and told me the therapist's waiting room had a rug like a cloudy day. I cried before I even sat down, she admitted. The crying was not about him. It was about the room. I understood. Safe rooms make your body confess things your mouth had been holding upright for months. Miss Paula arrived with a pie and a printed copy of the consent policy, laminated like it could survive a flood. She added one line in thick marker at the bottom that wasn't legal and wasn't optional. Love knocks. She taped it up by the mailboxes while the rest of us clapped as if we were witnessing a ribbon cutting for a store we owned. After lunch, I took a walk through the building the way you walk through a childhood home after it's been painted, touching corners, greeting doorknobs, seeing your face in unfamiliar gloss. In the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors, someone had hung a framed page with a simple heading. Tenant Rights, Human Words. Jamal had written it with Miss Paula editing for tone. Your bedroom is not a pilot program. Keys do not mean permission. Quiet enjoyment is a full sentence. Paper is not drama. Paper is care. If you feel a click in your bones, you are probably hearing the truth. Love knocks. I stood there a long time, longer than any neighbor needed me to. It felt like the moment in a story where the music doesn't swell. It recedes, making room for your breathing. That evening, Maya sat cross-legged on my bed and read out loud from a paperback she'd brought, stopping to laugh, stopping to sigh, stopping to ask me whether it felt different, this room. Yes, I said, not new. Honest. She nodded as if she had expected that answer all her life. Before she left, we watered consent and wiped lemon oil along the dresser. I put the motion chime back in the drawer and closed it gently, like telling a child, we're fine tonight. You can rest too. In the quiet, after her footsteps left the hall, I did one last small thing. I took a sticky note, wrote a sentence no one else needed to see, and slid it into the blue folder on top. I believe myself. First, last, always. The city would move on to other addresses and other storms. Hernandez's carbon paper would fade to a pale gray in a box beneath a desk. Raina would film other ceilings that needed witnesses. Ash would close our file with one more sentence that sounded like a benediction. Leary would sit in another training and learn a mouthful of new words that he could either mean or not. But in my little map of rooms, the verbs had changed. Doors felt heavier in the hand and kinder in the swing. Windows looked like choices, not exits. The ceiling didn't listen to me anymore. It kept me. I shut off the lamp. I left the door open the way I promised myself when this began. I fell asleep before the second paragraph of the book. Not because I was bored, but because peace is that tender. You don't want to keep it waiting. Some houses keep quiet secrets. Mine taught me this. Bedrooms are not pilot programs. Safety is not a surprise. And love, real love, always knocks. When I heard that little click and felt my bones go still, I chose paper over performance. I wrote things down, I told the right people, I let the truth stand taller than my fear. And you saw how the room changed when we named what was happening inside it. I didn't get revenge. I got records, I didn't raise my voice, I raised witnesses, the city came. The boxes closed, the holes were patched, and a building learned new verbs, knock, ask, inform, consent, repair, rest. That is justice too, the kind that lets you sleep. If you've ever felt that small click in your spirit, like something watching that shouldn't, what would you do now? Would you gather proof before anger gathers you? Would you call a friend, a lawyer, a city number? Would you trust your body when it says no? Tell me in the comments. Would you have done what I did or taken a different path? What boundary would you put in writing today to keep your peace tomorrow? If this story helped you find words for your own walls, share it. And if you want more quiet, honest courage in your feed, subscribe. We sit here every week with warm light and open doors, telling true things the calm way. Thank you for listening, for believing women when they say, I felt a click, and for helping this little family of stories grow. Love knocks, paper protects, rest is allowed.